to provide service to all parts of their homes, as an example. So you can kind of see here as well, in addition to the pressure zones, the water purification facilities are listed, and those are roughly in the pressure zone 3-4 area. So you'll notice in this graphic here, the system that's needed to get that water to our higher areas. So it's kind of snail looking icons are meant to represent pumps or pump stations. And then the tanks to store that water so that we have that buffer during those peak demand times. So our IWMP2 took a look at increasing our potable system storage and pumping for both growth and resiliency. Also, we looked at extending our distribution system to accommodate future growth. So that's what this exhibit here is demonstrating. So you can kind of see our existing city is kind of on the western half here, and the pipelines in the various colors were those backbone infrastructure that's kind of needed to support that future anticipated growth out to the north and the east. So in development of this, we looked at pressure, velocity, water quality considerations, also the pipes, the pumps, the tanks necessary to support that. And then did want to highlight that we didn't just look at that future area, but we also looked internal to the city, our existing system, for redundancy should there be an unplanned outage of our water purification facility, what might be needed or what improvements would be needed to help ensure that we can still meet our level of service goals. So with the natural topography of Aurora, we can move water relatively easily from the south to the north. The grade kind of goes in that direction. But if there is an outage, say of Griswold, we would then need Wemlinger and Binney to supply that. So water doesn't move as easily east or west within the city. So some of those pipelines kind of in red and pink, maybe a little bit difficult to see, but within the existing system were identified to help provide that redundancy should that occur in the future. I know that was a lot of information, just highlighted some of the key projects that were identified through this master plan, and then wanted to circle back around to a summary of that 20-year CIP that was developed. So those projects that I walked through kind of comprise a portion of what is shown here in this graphic. So 3.5 billion in the 20-year, first 10-year being about 2 billion. A large component of that you'll notice is water resources. Wild horse fits into that category. Then the second 10 years being that 1.5 billion, the breakdown there per discipline area. So,
all right, thank you.
A couple of years baked into boil down to a half an hour, but I know we answered some questions along the way, but happy to answer any more you might have.
Nice job, James. Councilwoman Bergan, any questions or comments?
You know I have one.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just trying to look at anticipating all this population growth and commercial growth and so forth. So like you said, 40% increase over the next 20 years in population, but households would be different than population because hopefully 2, 3, 4, 5 people live in a house, or even looking at apartment complexes. Are you working with planning to kind of, correlate the water demand, but with what's currently on the books in terms of, what's coming in for development, whether it be residential or commercial, and then what's anticipated? Is that how you calculated this?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So part of the demands development and analysis involves what we call land use based demand planning. So we do work very closely with the planning department, with our zoning code, with the best source of information for what we anticipate to be developed in all that vacant space, and then develop the demands based on what that land use, what those densities, what the actual homes, the number of dwelling units might look like. And of course, we evaluate it. We know we're seeing a little bit different products that are being developed. And so with future master plans, we'll also consider that, look at where trends are going and make sure that that's all included in the demands plannings.
So, and this comes up with constituents all the time. I'm sure Steve gets questions as well, but why are we, annexing land? Why are we continuing to grow when the because we say development pays its way, but obviously residents are seeing rates increase. And so they feel like they are possibly paying for the burden. So just, I guess, important to be able to analyze the effects, the impacts, but then also to be able to educate and communicate.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we do get those questions frequently. The financial team does a really good job keeping rate and fee revenues and costs separate, such that we can say that growth pays for itself. There's obviously some connection. Ratepayers essentially loan money to the development side of the house that we then recover from developers as they connect to the system. There is an interest, a carrying cost calculated in. So there's a lot of work that goes on in that space. But our system is all interconnected. So it is often confusing, and people do see the rates going up. And we've got that on the agenda. Well, we talked about rates last time.
Yeah.
If you look at the recent history, rates are going up at a much smaller incremental rate than fees are going up. So we've been doing rate increases in the 4 to 5% range most often, where our fee increases are in the 10 to 20% range recently, because the rates are just keeping track of the operational costs, the asset management costs that are required to operate the system. So that's good news, but it is hard for people to understand and to separate the impacts of growth from what's happening with their rate increases.
Yeah, I think there's a fear of eventually we do run out of water with all the growth. So, I mean, it's really difficult for me to ever answer these really difficult questions.
Ethical considerations, right? Even public safety, how far do we grow? How fast do we grow when it takes 45 minutes or more for a police response, if you get one at all, right? And is there water?
Yeah.
And it seems to me Wild Horse Reservoirs is sort of maybe obviously shifting our considerations here on alternatives. Is that right? To some degree?
To some degree. So the water utility does stay further ahead than any other group in the city, for whatever that's worth. But we look out basically 100 years in our planning future scenario projections. So we have water, either that we've already acquired and haven't taken to water court, already have acquired and some taken to water court. We have water in hand to provide or meet the needs of growth within the city, within our planning assumptions. And this is where where the conservation ordinance became critical. It's more critical for the future growth than it is for the existing customers. Even though it's important for both, that's really where it makes the biggest impact. The large water user guidelines that we're talking about bringing to council later this year, I think under potentially, as long as we get him up to speed and get him comfortable, under Councilman Sundberg's sponsorship, also provide more certainty with our planning projections. So it gives us certainty with how much water we're going to need in the future. And then we have 10 or 15,000 acre feet of water, maybe a little more than that now with the Arkansas Valley purchase, that we have that we're not currently using. Now it's in some state of whether we need to take it to water court or build out the gravel pit infrastructure. So there are some things we're going to have to do to your point, maybe with Wild Horse, to be able to use those water supplies as we keep moving forward. But we are well positioned for near to medium term growth within our planned areas, maybe with a little bit of a caveat on sewer infrastructure in the northeast quadrant. Sewer is a little different. I've been focusing on water. But we do continue to look out decades and need to do these things way in advance. So the good news with like a Wild Horse and us not being able to get it through the process as quickly as we had hoped is we started it much sooner than we were ever going to need it. So we like to get things done before and have them in place before the need is actually there. Now, would it benefit us? There would be some benefits, but it's not a necessity to have online until still a decade or two out, if that gives you any comfort.
Okay. Slight comfort there. Good news. Councilmember Bergan, anything else on this one?
No, thank you.
How serious are leaks in our system in supply? Is that an ongoing challenge or?
Supplies, so distribution system's a little different than supplies. So we have huge losses in our supplies because as we put water in reservoirs, they leak, they evaporate, they seep.
But piping within the city and lines?
Piping within the city, we're in really good shape.
We check that with pressure and robotics or whatever?
We check that with a number of things, including our new AMI meters help us with that.
Okay.
So
Good.
I didn't see our most recent losses report.
We're in the 4% range, which is really low for the country.
That's pretty good. Okay, good.
So
We've had a robust program for a long time.
Okay, good.
So we are doing really well with pipe leaks. In fact, a lot of the losses we have in the system are not leaks. They're people accessing water illegally.
Oh my goodness. Uh-oh. Okay. All right. Well, speaking of good news, Kat is going to bring us good news on her next two categories. Only good news, Kat.
Good news after good news. Stealing water and then fees, our allocations. So I'm gonna sit up for this. I'm sitting for a little while. Thank you, Casey. So I wanted to talk today about a little bit of a change that we're proposing for 2025. So I'm going to walk through our water allocation proposals. So a little bit of background, water allocations are just kind of what it sounds like. The set amount of water assumptions assigned to a specific property based on meter size, and billed usage is deducted from the allocated amount each month. Now, Aurora Water currently has two types of allocations, temporary and permanent. Our temporary allocations are the majority of our accounts. These are prior to 2013. And their allocations based on 2-year average usage. So they're reset every January. They result in a 2-tier structure. So the tier 1 is the amount that you pay within your allocation, and then it moves to a tier 2, which is if you exceed your annual allocation, you would pay a tier 2, which is slightly higher rate. And so, for example, in 2024, the difference between your tier 1 and your tier 2 is about 60 cents. We also have, it's about, I think, 600 accounts that are permanent allocations, and these are enforced by a contractual allocation agreement. And so you would come in, you will work with our team to determine what the allocation is. And then if you exceed that contractual allocation, you are charged at the tier 2 rate and then also charge at the capital recovery surcharge rate. So your exceedance is going to be at a pretty high amount, and so it's meant to keep you within your allocation. So like I mentioned, we have 606 accounts with a permanent allocation. All new irrigation accounts since 2017. We have signed allocation agreements. They're subject to capital recovery surcharges. And then we have about 8,000 accounts with a temporary allocation. Before 2023, allocations were set to a meter size base allocation. And so each year it recalculates to the 2-year average usage. And so as I'll show in the previous slide, it's created a problem for us in terms of usage. So here is a visual of how our tier 1 and tier 2 rates work. And so for the permanent allocations, they, depending on which class of customer they are, they will have their tier 1 rate, which is what is within their allocation. Then they would pay their tier 2 rate, which is a 60% difference. And then if you have a permanent allocation, you would pay the 2-tier rate. And then in addition, depending on when you exceed your allocation in the year, you would either pay the $20 per 1,000 gallons or the $10. If you don't have, or you have what we call a temporary allocation, you would only be subject to the tier 2 rate. And so you can exceed however amount of gallons, and then you would only pay the rate that's a 60 cents higher. Any questions on this?
From me.
Okay.
No.
And so what this has resulted is that we have a number of users that have consistently exceeded their allocation based on usage and have paid their 1,000 gallons at a really an amount that's only 60 cents higher. And so what this has also created has been that because of the system where the higher usage resets your allocation, their allocations have just increased every year. So we're looking at, and we just pull the highest the highest users for the different classes to just show that year over year, they're just exceeding it, and then it resets, and then their allocation becomes higher, and then they use more, and then it resets. Because it's an average, then your allocation becomes higher. And so it's created a problem in terms of all water usage for us.
This is educational for me. I didn't know that the University of Colorado Denver was a customer of ours. And does that go outside of Aurora?
And the Anschutz area.
Anschutz, okay, that makes sense then. And then Niagara, how long have they been in town for?
About 2011 or 12.
And was Françoise Bergan the casting vote to the decisive vote for them doing business in town?
For which,
For Niagara?
Or Niagara.
Niagara?
no, I was not on council.
They've been here a while.
They've been here a while. And
I would have said no.
as we move forward fixing these temporary allocations, most of these have opportunities through outside irrigation conservation methods like the school districts or University of Colorado to adjust some uses down and work with us on rebates. But Niagara's use is all their water bottling. And so their use is pretty much all indoor. So we will all hear, and we're going to reach out individually to Niagara. Gaylord isn't on this screen, but Gaylord is also in a category of having a temporary allocation, and their uses have been increasing dramatically. So, and Gaylord has some opportunity with outdoor irrigation. They've been resistant to do as much as we'd like out there, but we will probably be hearing from a few of these entities. Niagara will likely not be happy at all about our proposed fix because we would fix the tier 2 rate, make it significantly higher, or tell them they need to pay additional development fees. So that's part of why we wanted to make sure we brought this and have the discussion is we need to get out there and have some general communication within the community. We'll be reaching out individually to many of those on this list. But there will be a couple where the proposed change will cause some increased costs and they're not going to likely be thrilled.
Gotcha. And on the multifamily, are these just a few random examples or are these the top users of water?
They were, yeah, one of the top users.
A mobile home park being that high. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so we'll have to sort through. I'm not 100% sure. Did we look, do these have separate irrigation meters or do we know for sure? Yeah, so there's some of these customers we're going to have to look, they may have irrigation use embedded within some of their meters. And then there would be more opportunities to create efficiencies. But some of what you'll see is even with the, say, First Village East, the uses are not hugely additional. So they would see some impact, or we think, again, a lot of these customers will have opportunities to reduce their water use and take advantage of rebate programs to do that. Even potentially some of the multifamily indoor, if they're older and haven't taken advantage of the toilet rebates, for example, there might be opportunities.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, why is Cherry Creek School in commercial category and APS is in irrigation category? Because they're pretty close. I think APS is a little bit higher usage.
I don't know if I know for sure the answer to that. We have found sometimes as we've gone into the older accounts that they've been classified in areas that we've changed. So we've changed classifications on a few of them. And that's an opportunity I think we'll need to probably look a little closer unless you know right off.
Well,
So are they so one is charged more than the other for the same type of irrigation?
If there's a commercial meter, there's a specific commercial rate that is a little bit different, a little bit lower than the irrigation rate. So it is important to make sure we have the customers classified appropriately because the charges are a little bit different.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't put the school names with it. This is just one school. That's in Cherry Creek. And then this is one irrigation account tied to a school in Aurora Public.
Oh, it's not the whole district.
Yeah, the district puts their numbers up close, maybe even above Niagara. So the district-wide, the numbers are there, and the city itself, if we put all the city's meters combined together, the usage is even larger than what you're seeing with Niagara. So some of these customers have multiple meters, and when you put all of those together, the numbers get a lot bigger.
Okay, so actually, City of Aurora, you're saying would show up way high
Yes.
because of parks.
City of Aurora Parks, or City of Aurora between parks and facilities, is our second or third largest water user. And so opportunities there as well. We're already working with the city, fortunately, in a lot of this space. So, and we started some conversations with Aurora Public Schools. We've had conversations off and on up at the Anschutz campus. But the idea of getting rid of these temporary allocations and changing our rate structure to make it financially, the financial recovery of the impacts appropriate so that they're not being subsidized by other users, it will be a bit of a new idea. We haven't talked to too many about that.
Well, we had this discussion last year, so about fairness, kind of like the city setting the example for reducing water usage. I just put that in context there.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Kat. Who would like to proceed?
Okay, so some of the recent changes we have made. So starting in 2023, the idea was to not make the problem worse. And so what we ended up doing was setting all of these accounts with temporary allocations. We give them an allocation that was an average of 2021 and 2022. And then we stopped increasing allocations. But then the existing allocations now reflect the connection fee or capacity buy-in in the system. And they were not subject to capital recovery fees.
Yeah, and it may have been clear already, but literally with these temporary allocations, if they used more water, their allocation got reset to the higher use. So they just crept up and up and up and basically only ever got charged a tier 1 rate. And if they needed more, they just used more and the allocations reset higher and higher and higher. So we don't know, we haven't been able to piece the history or why or what the thinking was back when these were created way back when, but they are problematic and they're not consistent with how we're charging our other customers. These users' water use is being subsidized by our other customers.
Thank you. In 2024, we left the allocations frozen at the 2023 level. And then we also engaged in a 5-year study to look at determine appropriate allocation amounts. And so we looked at all of these accounts over a 5-year period, excluding 2023. It was a very unusual year. And we looked at the allocation, at the usage, and then set their allocation at the average usage within the 5 years and worked with our conservation team to sort of see what was the most appropriate methodology to use to make sure that we didn't underestimate or overestimate the allocation. So we did a pretty significant regression analysis and study to determine the allocations. And so we arrived at setting determining 5-year average allocations for all of these accounts.
And if I could, this is essentially a proposed soft landing. So we debated a few different ways to fix this. One of them was to go back, try to figure out what kind of a connection fee they paid, set their allocation at that, and then it would have had a larger impact. So what's being proposed is a bit of a soft landing to account for only the most recent 5 years of historical usage, give them some benefit of the fact that this has been in place for a long time, and essentially ensure that this problem doesn't continue to grow into the future. So the pain we were talking about for a few of the users has very much been dampened, and we're going to be sharing that with them as well, saying, hey, we're not going as extreme as we thought we could. We're trying to provide a soft landing, but eliminate this subsidization that has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger in our system. So kind of stopping the problem, resetting a little bit, but it's not necessarily going all the way back to where their tap fees were paid.
Have you had any discussions with any users regarding this?
We wanted to start here. So we've had discussions so far just with city management, CWAC, and now water policy. And part of what we're going to need to start doing now is going to the developers and going to the customers and letting them know.
Continue. The other thing we did in 2024 was extend allocation agreements to new multifamily properties. part of that was really to make sure that we're working with developers who could say that they could, and Elizabeth is going to talk a little bit more about the assumptions with the gallons per unit per day, but we do have assumptions of usage at the different classes. And so part of our effort here was to allow properties to come to us and say, hey, I have an assumption of usage that's lower, and then work with them with that data, establish an allocation agreement, and then the allocation agreement would be a contractual agreement saying this is what you have said your usage will be, this is a connection fee that you paid, and if you exceed that, then you would be subject to the capital recovery surcharge. So moving on, we have a 3-year implementation plan. So what we're proposing to do in 2025 is setting all around 8,000 accounts with the 5-year average usage, and then have the tier 2 rate be increased so that if these accounts exceed their allocation, they'll pay a higher rate than what currently tier 2 rate is. And then they won't be subject to the capital recovery surcharge still, but we'll also be engaged in a communication plan to notify about the new proposal, the allocation, and the new rate. And this is for the existing properties. For new properties that come, we'll continue signing a new allocation agreement and setting another water allocation. They're subject to the capital recovery surcharges. And then for multifamily properties, they will pay a connection fee that's reflective of a new 118 gallons per unit per day. And so this will make a little bit more sense once Elizabeth goes over it with the fee presentation. But we have reduced the assumption on the multifamily side based on some council asks from last session, and as well as the development community. For year 2, we're proposing that for the existing properties, capital recovery surcharges will be partially implemented. And so we'll do tier 1, tier 2 at the higher rate, and then tier 3 will be transitioning the capital recovery surcharge to a tier 3 rate that will be partially implemented. And so we're doing it sort of in different sort of steps. And then we're also proposing that city code be updated accordingly for new properties. We're going to continue with setting an allocation based on connection fees paid. They'll set up an allocation agreement, and then any account that exceeds the allocation will be subject to the partial tier 3 rate structure. And then we're also going to be engaging in a full cost of service study for water, sewer, and storm. The last time we did a full cost of service was around 2017. Typically, we do these every 5 years, 5 or so years. And so I think it's a really good time for us to engage that and really revisit all of our cost assumptions for the utility. And then in 2027, it's going to be sort of the full impact. We'll implement the results of the cost of service. We'll implement the full burden of the tier 3 rate structure. And then we'll update city code to eliminate allocation agreements and actually have the authority to set up allocations in code as opposed to having any new properties come in and sign allocation agreements. Any questions?
What do you anticipate, if you were to play devil's advocate here, you're an existing property owner, what comments do you anticipate from such?
The way we're proposing to do this would be to essentially set up a tiered rate structure on these customer classes. So the comments would likely be, wait a second, our allocation historically has just gone up and up and up. Why can't that continue? So we'll get that feedback. And then, hey, tier 2 used to only cost 60 cents more per 1,000 gallons, and now you're saying tier 2 is like $7 or $8 more per 1,000 gallons. That's a big change. That's part of why we've got the 3-year phase in, is to let them adjust to that, both adjust in their system or adjust their financials. But we'll hear probably about we don't want permanent fixed allocations. And we historically didn't have those. And 2, we don't like these costs that would be associated with those permanent allocations either. So we'll likely get both of those.
This is also meant to manage water properly for these individuals to conserve or just be careful.
Yeah, it's consistent with our water conservation, water being a precious resource in the West. Even, and this is a bit of a caveat to what I said earlier, but even though we have water supplies for our existing population, we're seeing warmer and periodically drier periods now than we did historically too, and those are impacting our existing water supplies. So we need to become more efficient in the arid West, and this is consistent with that as well.
Councilwoman Bergan.
Yeah, and maybe you answered this. I'm sorry, I had to take a message. Other than getting their feedback, are we going to be offering assistance with reducing their water usage?
Very much so, yes. So we think our rebate programs are well positioned to provide a lot of assistance. Now, we also have water audits that we offer, indoor, outdoor water assessments. So we're well positioned with what we'll be offering. Probably change is a little bit difficult for anybody. And so we'll have some customers who will take advantage of what we're offering, and I think will work well. We may have some others who are more resistant and say, I don't want to make changes, and so I don't want to take advantage of what you're offering. But we do have a lot of things we can offer. Again, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk about Niagara specifically, is it would be extremely difficult for a Niagara to implement water conservation. It simply would mean they would sell less water on the back end. Right. So for them, it's kind of just a financial impact into their business model. So we are confident we will hear from them. Now, how far they go with that, whether they appreciate the 5-year average as a soft landing, how much they appreciate that, we're not totally sure. But we do have some other customers that are probably in a similar situation, but with smaller volumes of water, where it will be difficult for them. We have a mushroom grower facility, for example. It would be difficult for them to use less water. So they would fit into that same category. Most, we think of the customers, a large majority will be able to take advantage of our programs. Whether they're happy about that or willing, that's to be seen.
Is water taxed, water bottles?
Yes, it's taxed as fits into the grocery category. So
Yes, I don't think it is taxed,
not
right?
in Aurora. It's not taxed in Aurora then. Yeah, so it's taxed in some places.
Okay. Do we know if they got an incentive way back?
Yes, I believe they got some incentives to come here, and they took advantage of our old tap fee structure. So they paid $19 million for their water connection fee, and they got about $50 million worth of water for the $19 million.
Wow.
So they were subsidized significantly on the water tap fee piece because we weren't charging volumetrically. And they, I believe, got some tax incentives also.
Okay. And I don't think they employ a lot of people. I can't remember.
They do not. Depends on if you count the truck drivers. But.
Right. So we gave an incentive when we don't get sales tax revenue and they don't employ a lot of people. Okay.
It predated most of us.
have some comments offline about that one. Kat, any more questions? And we would bring that before a study session, apparently. Or you want to wait a little bit?
That will
Need to hammer out some
probably,
details?
yeah, we'll probably start some of the discussions with some of the customers a little bit more.
Okay.
And then, yeah, it will have to come through council because it will require changes to ordinance.
Yeah, we'll let Françoise sponsor that one.
You're the chair.
Generous.
And maybe the next one too, Nancy. Okay, thank you. Kat, would you like to continue?
Yes, so I'm going to have Elizabeth
Okay,
present, and
great.
so you can introduce yourself and go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. So Elizabeth Gillitzer-Gallardo, I am the manager of revenue and pricing. I've been in the position for about 8 months now, but been with the city for about 13 years. So you'll probably see my face a little bit more when it comes to rate and development fees, which I'm here to present, which is the 2025 development fee adjustments. So we wanted to give some background on what connection fees are, and you might hear them called development fees or impact fees. There's different names across different utilities. But basically a connection fee is a one-time charge that's paid when a customer is connecting to the system. It's paid at the time we're issuing a building permit for construction. And truly it's to fund capital project costs and to retire debt that we've borrowed to expand our system. And the Aurora ratepayers reimbursement for funding the capital costs to construct the utility system with enough capacity to serve our future customers. So what is incorporated into our connection fees, you can see here, is first the water resource fee, which is basically acquiring new water supplies for Aurora Water. Then the source of supply, conveyance and storage, so storing of the water, moving the water. So examples there, the reservoir storage and prairie waters. Treatment and transmission. So this is the cost with the treatment of the water and then getting the water out to our Aurora citizens. And then the transmission development fee. This is the cost to upsizing projects, and we reimburse some of this to developers if they upsize during their project. So truly altogether, that is what the water connection fee is comprised of, but mainly 80% of our water connection fee is the water resource costs and the source of supply costs. And this just gives you a visual representation of the costs. So where it says 80%, that's the water resources, that's the source of supply, 15% for the treatment and transmission, and then 5% for the transmission development. So 80% goes to acquiring water, the water rights, and then buying the land. And then of course, like I said, the source of supply. So before we jump into what we're proposing for the 2025 fees, we wanted to go back and look at our current method for multifamily connection fees. We were asked by City Council last year and our development community to look at our current method and see if our volumetric usage is appropriate for our multifamily class. So currently, and this has been since 2013, we changed to volumetric usage for all classes, and multifamily is a per unit per day method. It was established with 10 years worth of data, which gave us a basis of 153.4 gallons per day that's used in our connection fee calculation. So you can see there, our current connection fee without the transmission portion is $11,929 per unit. If you divide that by our recoverable water fee, that gives you the 153 gallons per day per unit. So again, we reanalyze this based on the council feedback and the development community. And we actually took a look this year at our multifamily usage, and it was a 5-year data set, so from 2018 to 2022. And what we found with that is that we actually would need to reduce the GPD to 118, so 153 to 118.
And just to provide a little bit more context, part of the conversations that we had was, there's a lot of new development that multifamily that has higher, water efficiency, new fixtures, uses better technology. And so part of our rationale with going back 5 years was just taking into account just newer buildings that are more efficient. And then also, instead of looking at what we were looking at 10-year data that dated all the way back to, I think it was like 2006 or something like that, or just way older buildings. And so that's the analysis that we did. And while we chose 5 years, we determined that was a good sort of average time spent to look at multifamily.
So as Kat was saying, oh, go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, so you're reducing their usage to 118 or ability to use, and if they go over that, then they jump into different rate.
Yeah, and that's a good catch. The other thing we're proposing to do, so multifamily historically did not sign those allocation agreements that we talked about. They fit into those temporary allocation agreements.
Oh,
As part of this change, what we're saying moving forward is they would have permanent allocations. So they would not have those fake allocation agreements. So then, yeah, if their water usage, if for whatever reason they're less efficient than what they are demonstrating when they pay their connection fee, and say they change out their laundry machines or whatever, and their water use goes up, they would then get triggered into the capital recovery surcharge. So we would then collect the revenue and not have the negative impact. So yeah, good catch.
So with the more recent multifamily that's more efficient, we're seeing the 118 per day as more of an average.
Yeah, we're seeing, yes, that's the kind of the average that we were comfortable with. There are some that are a little higher, and there are some that are a little lower. That's the usage we're comfortable saying this is an appropriate usage. If they're going more efficient to that, there is some question of how sustainable that is for us. So there are some that are a little more efficient, but we're not convinced it's necessarily a sustainable level, and that's part of why
we don't want the older apartment units to be punished in the new formula.
They won't. Because we're using that 5-year most recent water use data to convert their temporary allocation to a permanent allocation. So that's one of the benefits of the soft landing. They would also, a lot of the multifamily have taken advantage of our toilet rebates. That's one area I understand we've had good success. So some of them have become more efficient themselves than what they were back in 2006, 7, whatever. And we also, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, we're not necessarily proposing to fix this over a singular year, because that would have impacts too. And Elizabeth is going to talk about that. So keep that in mind a little bit.
So as Kat was saying, the 5-year data is showing that more recent water conservation efforts, newer technology, and more efficient fixtures. So the bottom portion of this is just showing what we've done this year with that utilization study, using the 5 years worth of data and decreasing the GUD to 118. But in the end, decreasing the usage to 118 creates a shortfall in our revenue requirements for 2025, because ultimately we're lowering the usage, which is going to lower the connection fee we're taking in, which is a shortfall in the revenue requirements. So as Marshall was saying, there is 2 scenarios within this presentation. This first scenario is truly just a full impact if we try to recover that shortfall in the revenue. Scenario 2 is truly what we're going to propose. But scenario 1 shows the decrease in the multifamily usage to the 118, which means we'd have to increase the water recoverable fee across all classes, and we'd have to increase it by 20%. So that would cause a 20% increase in connection fees. But ultimately, multifamily would show a decrease in their connection fee by 7%, which is that $11,428.
Essentially what happens is if you reduce the usage assumption, it drives up the unit cost of water. So in order to generate the revenue that's needed. So all customer classes would see an increase in the unit cost for water. So the unit costs would go, they're shown down there in the, where you look at commercial recoverable fee. So cost per gallon per day of water would go from like 80 up to 96 or 112 up to 135. So in driving the unit cost up for all customer classes, that's where that 20% fee increase would ripple out to single family, not multifamily, because they're seeing their unit cost goes up, but their unit use goes down, so they don't see a 20% increase. But the other customer classes would see that 20% increase in their fee, and we would do a slight decrease to multifamily. So we don't think this is a great idea. This would be if we fix it in just instantaneously. It would have a ripple and send a mixed message, because in a couple of years, we would be back increasing the multifamily connection fee as well, because we're seeing the connection fees go up consistently. So rather than do a decrease and then an increase, we've got a different scenario proposed.
This still shows with scenario 1, and this is with the lower usage, and then that unit cost of the $96.85, and that gives the $11,000 connection fee for multifamily per unit. And then it just shows the 7.4 decrease in multifamily connection fee.
And the previous unit cost was the $80
Yes.
here too, right? So that's that unit cost impact.
Sorry, 96.85. So this is scenario 2, and this is what we're proposing. So this is a phased-in approach over 2 years, so 2025 and 2026. This means we would have 2 recoverable water fees, one for residential, commercial, and irrigation, and then another for multifamily. For residential, commercial, and irrigation, we would increase it by 10% in 2025, and then another 10% in 2026. And then for multifamily, we would increase it, but we would lower the usage, which keeps the multifamily connection fee what it's currently at for 2024, which is that $12,341 per unit.
So that's kind of the behind the scenes math that we wanted to share. What we'll be doing and probably talking about a little more publicly is we're proposing with the multifamily connection fee to leave it flat for the next 2 years. So it would not increase or decrease. It would stay at the $12,000 through this math that would be going on in the background. But that's what we'll be taking to the developers and saying, we're proposing to leave your connection fee flat for the next 2 years, while the other customer classes, single family, commercial, industrial, their connection fees will be going up by 10% for 2 years.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So I know we're building a lot of multifamily for density, but people also are trying to buy homes and not rent forever. So aren't we just basically increasing the cost of housing for somebody who wants to buy a house?
You could look at it that way, and I'm sure we'll have some of that feedback in the process. Really, what we're doing is we're backing up and saying, and this, keep in mind, we have the volumetrically based fee now. So what we've had to do with our fees is say, here are our costs of developing the system, building the infrastructure, all the costs that drive connection fees. And then we've backed those into a cost per gallon of use per day. So what we've tried to do with our connection fees is we know how much irrigation and commercial use, those are very straightforward because they provide detailed calculations. They get allocation agreements. So we know exactly how much to charge them that recovers those costs. Single family, we've kept up with pretty well in how much water they're using. Now we're basing that on number of bathrooms. We found that really strong correlation, and outdoor irrigation. And then we further refined that for the low water use and high water use outdoor irrigation. So we know how much water they're using. Multifamily, again, the problem we ran into is we had used a data set and kind of some averages historically that went back to 2006-07 timeframe. And we hadn't kept up well with how much water they're actually using. So the ripple effect is, yes, this will be shifting some of the revenue collection from multifamily over to the other customer classes, including single family, because the unit cost is going up. The unit cost is going up for everybody. But it is based on actual data, and it's consistent with each user paying for the exact demand they put on the system, or the very closely calculated demand they put on the system.
And that
So-
takes into consideration the fact that you can't put turf anymore.
Yes. So again, the multifamily is easier because now we require separate irrigation meters for them. So that gets captured in the irrigation meter calculation, where we've been requiring allocation agreements for the last, since 2017, 7 years. Single family, it's accounted for, but when we changed our turf requirements was when we brought the ordinance changes that implemented low water use fees and high water use fees for outdoor irrigation. So it got captured on the single family as well. But you're right, the connection fee increases for single family connection fees we're proposing would go up 10% in 2025, and then another 10% in 2026. In 2026, we would do that full cost of service analysis again. And
But if people are using less water because we can't have turf, they're building brand new homes, they can't put turf in the front yard, they can only put 500 square feet in the backyard, and then people are brand new homes, obviously better efficient water use. So you're going to still penalize them in 2026 with an additional 10% increase, yet water usage is going down.
Kind of. So the volumetric rate is going to go up by 10%. But they will be using, to your point, they'll be, and that's a very, very good point, and I didn't cover that very well. They'll be using less water as well. So their overall impact, and this is one of the conversations we've had repeatedly with developers, is look, you guys control the amount of fee you pay now. We were trying that conversation with them for years, and they kept putting high water use turf in and then complaining about their fee. So then we said, okay, now you can't put the low or the high water use turf in, so your fees are going to come down as a result. But the volume, so the volumetric rate will be going up 10%, but they'll be putting less turf in. Generally, we do have some site plans, you remember when we made that change, that were grandfathered in. So their site plans still would allow them to put turf in. So we're still having some of that conversation in some of these developments like Aurora Highlands, where we're saying, look, you guys, we don't want to hear you complain about your higher fees. Go put less turf in like you can, but aren't quite required to yet. So we've got some of that going on too, but that's a very good point. Because of the changes in outdoor landscaping, even though the volumetric rate is going up, the fee they pay won't necessarily be going up the same amount. Did that make sense?
Kind of, yeah.
You know, there's the mindset of passing savings on to the customer, right? If their estimated usage is 118 now, That's great news. It's less. It's going to cost us less, and then we just pass it on to the customer in the fair world, right?
Yep, and we don't control that piece, obviously, but yeah, these are lower costs that are going to the developers for both the affordable single family and the multifamily, and they can pass those costs along if they choose, or again, we don't have much influence on how they do that.
But if we actually are getting people to use less water, commercial, multifamily, single family, and you have less revenue, then what?
Yeah, so that's the rate piece, and there
Yeah.
is you can find a lot of literature or news articles and academia studies on that. Generally speaking, in a system like Aurora, where we still are having significant growth, the impact is not, there's likely some financial impact, but it's not nearly as large as a system that's not growing. So the time for us to implement water conservation and try to get it throughout our system is while we're growing, because the new connections are bringing in additional revenue.
Right.
That's helping offset some of the revenue losses associated with conservation.
Right. So if we were not growing, at some point, you would, by decreasing usage, you're going to have less revenue, and then you're still going to have to maintain the system. So then you probably would raise the rates. So,
Yep.
okay.
In those systems, you will see rate presentations where they're coming forward with, say, 10% rate increases, and they're attributing a significant portion of that increase to water conservation and the loss of revenue associated with that. So
Yeah.
we're in a
Kind of
different
catch-22.
It is a catch-22, and with the rate of growth in Aurora right now, it's being offset by the growth, so it's not really causing that loss of revenue for us like it is stable systems.
Okay.
Interesting. Oh, please proceed.
So this is just showing you scenario 2 with the 2025 proposed fees. So it shows that there's the 2 recoverable water fees that you can see there in red. Multifamily is at that 104, and then under the commercial is the 8885, and that's for single family, commercial, and irrigation again. This shows for 2025 that first 10% increase across all those classes, but multifamily again remains the same.
Yes, so instead of the 96, it would be the 88, 85.
So this is scenario 2 as well, and this just shows side by side for 2025, the first 10% increase, and then 2026, the second 10% increase. So you can see in 2025, for the commercial recoverable fee, it goes from 88.85 to 97.74, but multifamily again stays consistent.
So one thing to observe here is you see we're still not quite to the point where we've incorporated this change completely. So 2027, the multifamily increase will likely be lower than the increase to everybody else as well. So it'll take us kind of 2.5 years to get this done. Because ultimately, once it's fully stabilized, there won't be a difference between what's showing as a 104 and the 98.
So this just shows for 2025 the comparison of both scenarios. So scenario 1 and scenario 2. In that second column is scenario 1, and that is the full 20% increase, but 1 recoverable fee across all classes. And then scenario 2 shows the first 10% and then the 2 recoverable fees. This is our existing connection fees for 2024 for all the classes. And then this is just a snapshot of what it would look like for scenario 2 in 2025 with that 10%, but again, multifamily staying consistent with 2024. And do you want to go back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just I know some people are still sort of digesting, and so just wanted to pause here and see if there's any questions, concerns, comments. Yeah, no worries.
Well, along the lines of Councilwoman Bergan's point is costs for home buyers and the affordable, well, lack of inventory, affordability is on the minds of a lot of people, right? It's a supply and demand issue, and so there's sensitivity there as we discuss these things.
And this is a good slide to be on to talk about that. So you see the indoor fee for different size residential developments. So you see a small 1 to 2 bathroom, single family residential home is only paying $8,500 for the indoor portion of their water use. And then where they gain a lot of control is in that outdoor use area, because now if they put all low water use landscape, which some of these developers are doing, you'd pay the $1.42 or $1.44 per square foot, $2 per square foot if you put high water use landscape in. So they have a lot of control in that space, and that fee can also be very low depending on how they manage that. And then now we've recently provided them guidelines where we're limiting how much of that $2.03 or $2.04 higher fee per square foot they can pay, because we're saying you can only put a maximum of 500 square feet. So the fees, and then the multifamily, you see the fee is the 12,000. So it's between the 1 to 2 bathroom single family residential and the 3 to 4 bathroom. Eventually, over the years, because this is 2025, what you'll see in 2026 is that it will be even closer to the 1 to 2 bathroom. And then in 2027, it will be very close to that 1 to 2 bathroom indoor number. So overall cost of now this is just the water fee. The sewer fee is smaller, and then the stormwater fee is even smaller than that. But overall, it's a very small percentage.
4%.
Or
For a $400,000 home, assuming a 3 to 4 bedroom is about $400,000, the water cost is about 4%.
so it's as critical as water is, we think that's a huge bargain, but we're biased.
So if someone builds a house with only 2 bathrooms, they're still having that increase in their connection fee.
The 85.
And they may not even, like, I'm thinking of small lots, duplexes, whatever that are basically no yard. And they're building smaller homes with only 2 bathrooms. I don't know anybody who builds a house with 1 bathroom unless it's a ADU. They're still going to have a pretty good increase.
Pretty good is relative. Again, the indoor fee will go up hundreds of dollars. The outdoor fee will go up, depending on what they do with their landscaping, could go up. For your scenario, maybe $100. So they'll they're seeing an impact in that scenario of probably less than $1,000 on a, what do those sell for now, of $400,000 property?
Yeah, I mean, there's one developer that's trying to do modular that is going to try to get the price point down to like 250,000.
Yeah, okay. So for that one, you'd see about $1,000 impact on a 250,000. So it's still a very small impact in the big picture, but it's not non-existent. It's there, but it's down in the, again, probably $1,000 range if they're doing the super efficient outdoor irrigation.
Thank you.
So we wanted to put some information in here about some of our projects, just so you have some context of where the connection fees are going. So this is our North Campus, and this is where we have the radio well sites. And as you can see, this is on the left there, well, my left, it is showing May 2023. This is before. And then this is a photo from February 2024, but this is the expansion. And ultimately, this is to collect more water into our system. In the next two slides, it kind of gives, is it going? Sorry, I'm trying to change it. There we go. Thank you. So this is two of the radio wells there. This is the Seacon and the Caisson radio wells, and they have about a year left in construction. Also at North Campus are the vertical wells. We have 29 vertical wells there. Again, these are there to collect more water within the system. Up next is sewer and stormwater connection fees. And again, just taking a quick break, is there any more questions regarding the water connection fees? Okay, so moving on to the sewer connection fees. So in 2023, we actually performed a study on our sewer connection fees, looking at our capital costs, the capital projects, and we determined that we needed to increase our sewer connection fees by 60%. So in the total fee column, that is where we need to be for sewer connection fees. But what we ultimately proposed was a 3-year phase-in for sewer at 20% each year from 2024 to 2026. So what we're proposing for 2025 is that second 20% increase. And what that looks like across the 3 years, this shows the 20% increase each year. And to break it down a little bit further, this shows the difference of our 2024 sewer connection fees and our 2025 sewer connection fees.
And just for context, I know for the sewer connection fees, we just have some bigger projects coming on in 2025 that are related to development. And so a large portion of that is obviously our capital program with sewer. And we're almost there because I know Councilmember Sundberg, you have a 12:30 hard stop. So we're almost there.
That is additional impact on top of the 1,000 for water, for those products that we just talked about.
That's getting steep. But please proceed.
So stormwater connection fees, we actually have not increased stormwater connection fees since 2018. So we are proposing a 5% increase this year just to keep up with the capital projects and the costs. So this actually shows residential. Multifamily and commercial stormwater connection fees is actually 14 cents per square foot of lot size. With the 5% increase, it'll increase it to 15 cents. And then the last few slides just gives you more context to the sewer and stormwater projects. So First Creek Interceptor and then the Snack Creek Interceptor. This just shows some of the pictures that are the projects currently going on. And this is going to be moving wastewater to our Metro recovery facilities for treatment. And then one of our stormwater projects that we're highlighting here was near West Tollgate, near First Avenue. And as you can see, it's a storm channel erosion rebuild. In that first picture under August 2022, you can see the pipes are exposed, there's casing exposed, and then it shows the after in May 2023 last year. And that is connection fees. Is there any questions?
Oh, Françoise?
Nope.
Council?
I'm good.
Okay, well, this would come before study session logically, sequentially here.
Yeah, the study session format's a little different now, so I'm not,
Okay.
it will come to council. I'm
Okay.
not sure exactly how. We need to figure that out.
We're seeing some tough reality in our capital improvements. Okay. Any other questions, comments? I'm sorry that I have to leave so quickly, Shirley.
We went long today.
Right. Well, our next meeting, Casey, would be when? Let them.
August 21st. Our meeting, there's a water tour.
And we have a water, well,
tour?
workshop on 28th.
Okay. So we'll wait to hear some clarification on, so we probably won't have a meeting then.
Is there something we needed to bring?
For the wise.
Yeah, we can do that. We could do that later. Yeah, so I think we could probably cancel the 21st and encourage everyone to attend on the 28th for
Okay.
that's a one-day.
We're going to see some different territory there. Right?
We're going to get to London Mine.
London Mine,
I don't
okay.
think anybody's been there.
And is Wild Horse on that one too?
It is.
Okay, good.
So Wild Horse and London Mine.
And Councilmember Bergan, I haven't heard from you. If you can attend on the 28th?
Oh, I thought I said yes. I accepted in the calendar.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
Perfect.
The September meeting will be on early.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for going along today and
Yeah, thank
have
you.
a wonderful day. I got to sprint out of here.
Okay.
See ya.
Thank you.